Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the What's New in USoft 11 webinar. My name is Mark from Brummen. I'll be hosting you today, and together with me here in the room, I've got Rijnders, the CTO here at USoft. We've got quite a packed program for you today. There's a lot of new and exciting features in USoft 11 that we want to show you. So we're going to dive straight in. A couple of items before we start. This webinar will be fairly technical as we're discussing new features released in our platform or in the upcoming release of USoft 11. A recording of this webinar will be sent to you probably by tomorrow once the webinar is completed. Should you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat, and at the end of the webinar, we've reserved some time to answer your questions. If you have any questions at a later point in time or when rewatching this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us and we will be in contact with you to answer the questions you have. Before we dive into all of the fantastic content that we have for you today, a schedule about the upcoming release of USoft 11. The first beta of USoft 11 Beta 1 will be available by the end of this week. The plan is to have Beta 2 ready by the end of Q2 of this year. And the first full production version of USoft 11 is planned for early Q4 of this year. Before we dive into all the content, a little bit of a roadmap about how we got there. We've done several great things here at USoft. After the release or before the release of USoft 10, we introduced the community platform, which is an ongoing process that we're still very much involved with, that we're putting new content on as we move along, and that we're trying to engage with our customers and our users on a daily and weekly basis. Based on input received through the community and through other channels, we build all new and exciting features in USoft 11. And at the end of this webinar, I'll also give you a sneak peek into what's planned for the USoft 11 series. So new features or new functionality we're looking at after the release of USoft 11 that's imminent. For today, we'll be following a three-chapter approach. The first thing we're going to look at is some of the existing capabilities within our platform that we've improved and made even better. The second part we're going to be looking at is new features that we've added on top of everything that's already existing in the platform. And lastly, we're going to look at some of the additions that they haven't mentioned in these first two chapters, but which are also part of the USoft 11 release. The USoft low-code platform consists of two parts, as you can see on the screen. On the left-hand side, you see the studio part. That's where business and low-coders can work together to define the business rules and business processes that form the basis of the application that's going to be developed. And the development of the application application itself is done in the app factory with all the components that you as USoft users will be very much familiar with, some of which we'll be seeing today as well in some of the videos that we've prepared for you for this webinar. As mentioned in the beginning, firstly, we're going to have a look at existing features that we've improved in the USoft 11 release. A couple of items here. The first one is that we'll now be supporting .NET 6.0 for Linux as well as Windows. We'll be including support for JDK 21 in the Beta 2, as mentioned at the beginning. That's planned for release by the end of Q2 of this year. And we've also improved the import and export routines within our platform. And the improvement consists of the fact that on top of XML and JSON, we already could import and export. We've now added the capability to handle binary data, blob data type in a blob data type using a base 64 encoding. Furthermore, we've improved the SQL parser in the platform. The SQL parser is now able to detect and highlight multiple errors, syntax errors at once. In the past, it would walk through your statement, and if you had made an error, it would find them one by one. Now it's able to find them, to find multiples in one go, and also give you highlighting of where in your statement you might have made an error. We've also improved the way that tables are initialized. If you want to load data after the initialization of a table, you had to use files in the past. Now you can just use XML or JSON statements included in your table definition to load initial data into your table when it is created. We've added template domains in the definer. Practical use of that we'll see later on in this webinar. But these are domains that use the most commonly used data types that you now don't have to declare yourself anymore, but those are included in the package when you start using USoft 11. And lastly, of the improving existing features chapter is the grouping of USoft items on your taskbar when using Windows. As it stands right now, these are all listed separately or grouped together based on the settings you have. In the USoft 11 release, you can now start choosing where you want to have them shown on your taskbar, making it easier to switch between the various different components of the platform when using more than one at the same time. Let's start having a look at all of the great new features that have been developed for the USoft 11 release. The first one is a continuation of what was built in USoft 10.1. That's the capability to use a web template, to use smart web templating in your web designer. The way a USoft web application looks and feels straight out of the box can now be changed and updated completely to your own needs, enabling you to create your own custom page layouts for whatever page types you may need. Added to that, we've created a brand new base template that you can use that uses the latest and greatest web standards. It's based on Bootstrap 5, the Bootstrap 5 framework, and it reduces your web app development time by up to 50% because a lot of page types and a lot of basic information that's required for your web application is already included in the web template and doesn't require any more development from your side. Moving on to the next item, which is repository version control and comparison. Up until now, all of your USoft application metadata was stored in your USoft repository in the definer. If you're working with multiple users on a same project, this could lead to potential issues if you're not sure what the other developers have worked on, causing potential issues there. USoft 11, apologies, offers you a file-based version control for your USoft repository. You can, by using or being able to use it, you can extend your development environment with a file-based version control system, which will then contain all of your USoft metadata, but all of the metadata will also still be stored in your definer. You're just being given an additional framework to synchronize changes and also to see what changes have been made by other developers and see what history is available for those changes. This greatly improves the ability to do version control and comparison, and is based on industry standards. To demonstrate this, I'll be showing you four different videos. A short introduction about these videos. In the first video, you'll see that an initial repo is being created by user 1. You can distinguish between the two users by the desktop background that you'll be seeing. User 1 has a black background and user 2 has a purple background. In the second video I'll be showing is you'll see user 2 connecting to this repo. The third video will see user 2 making some changes to that repo, to the use of metadata and pushing their changes. In the fourth video I'll be showing you'll see user 1 again pulling these changes and synchronizing them in his own repository. I'll now start video 1, and as we go I will talk you through what's happening on the screen as well.
In this video, we're going to set up file-based version control for our USoft repository. User 1 creates the required folder on their machine, opens USoft and selects the newly created folder as the target for their file-based version control. We see a number of folders being created, a separate one for each of the different types of implementations you can create in USoft. As an example, we're having a look at the table folder, which shows files for each of the table in our repository. As a last step, we're pushing the repository to a branch in Git.
So we just saw the creation of the initial reproduction by user 1. We're now going to be seeing user 2 connecting to and pulling those changes to their own environment.
In this video, we're going to pull the repository to the machine of user 2. Once the files have been synchronized, we create the definer tables. Once the tables have been created, the definer is opened, and we navigate to the version control option in the Tools menu. User 2 connects to the repository that was pulled to their machine earlier in this video. The repository is synchronized, as you can see at the left-hand bottom of the definer. Once the synchronization is completed, you're prompted with all the changes that have been imported, and next you're asked to check your repository. After the check is completed, we can see all of the repository contents in the catalog. In the previous video, we imported a repository from file. In this video, we're going to be making some changes in the repository. First, we're changing a domain constraint. On the left-hand bottom side, we see the file structure of the repository. As you can see, when we save the changes, they're saved in the files, and a change icon is shown. The second change we're making is the change to the background of a field in Windows Designer. As with the changes to the constraint, when the changes are made and saved, they are saved in the files. As a last step, we push our changes back to the branch we pulled them from.
Okay, that was the end of video number 3, where we made a couple of changes in our repository. We made a change to a domain as well as a painting on a screen, and those have now been pushed back to our branch. Video number 4 is the one we're going to be looking at right now. That's the video in which user 1 will be pulling the changes that user 2 has made to their own machine and synchronizing those with what's happening in their own USoft environment.
To ensure user 1 is working with the latest version of the repository, we're starting this video by pulling the changes from the branch to the machine of user 1. In the summary, we can see some changes have been made. When we open the definer, a window is shown alerting us to changes that have been made that aren't synchronized to our local repository yet. We can see the details of the changes, and when we click on Synchronize, the changes are imported into our repository. As the changes included objects that are active, we're prompted to check the repository once the synchronization is completed. When the check is completed, we can see that the changes made to the domain constraint in the previous video are now part of our repository as well.
So what we saw in this video is that we pulled changes that user 2 made into the USoft 1 or the user 1 repository and synchronized it with their own environment, enabling you to do your own version control using that file-based version control system for your USoft repository. I'm going to move on to the next chapter. In this next chapter, we're going to have a look at the Studio and App Factory experience. As I showed you in one of the first slides, the USoft platform consists of both Studio and the App Factory. Studio is used to capture your business rules and potentially your BPMN diagrams or your SBVR diagrams. The App Factory obviously is used to develop your application. In this USoft 11 release, we've worked to bring those two closer together. And what we did is we've enabled the use of SBVR in our App Factory. We'll be seeing some videos of these as well, whereby you now get the color coding that exists in Studio in the App Factory as well. Added and linked to that, we've made it easier to capture your implementations in the App Factory and also improve the way that that is done. Another very cool feature that's been added is that you're now able to draw ER diagrams in the definer. And once you've created those ER diagrams, which can also be created from the information that's available in the definer, if you make changes, you can synchronize them straight away back to your definer, and then those changes will be applied in your tables. We'll see an example of that as well. Linked to that are the template domains I mentioned earlier. So the base domains that are used in your application are also created when you're using the ER diagram drawing functionality. For the portion that speaks to SBVR and the App Factory, we once again have got a couple of videos lined up for you. The first one, in the first video, we'll see a user browsing through a small portion of a project in Studio, again regarding the travel application, and they'll be particularly looking at local branches of that travel application. Once those are found, we'll make an export from Studio. In the second video, we'll continue working with that export, but we'll start importing it into the definer and show you how those sentences now look when they have been imported into the definer. You'll see the color coding being applied in the definer, as well as the ability to click on the color coding and navigate through Studio from within the definer. The third video will be looking into how the implementations can now be linked to those formulations. In the fourth video, we'll look into that in a little bit more detail, capturing more details around the implementation of your formulation. I'll start the first video now, in which we'll have a quick look in Studio and make an export from all the information that is available in Studio.
We are looking at Studio. and I'm browsing to a travel agency vocabulary. After searching for everything, we zoom in on local branches. When we click on Export Full, we make an export of all the sentences available in this vocabulary.
Well, that was a very short video about making an export from Studio. You saw that we searched for all available content in a particular project, then zoomed in on the local branch term within that project and made an export of all available sentences. And that export was then downloaded to the particular user's own file system. We'll now be looking at the second video where we'll import these or this export from Studio into the definer.
We will now import the vocabulary into the definer. Using the import menu option, we get to see a dialog. Select the file and choose the import option. Once the sentences are imported, we can find them as business rules in Teamwork, including the color coding and clickable links to take you back to Studio in the browser control.
That was a second video about importing the export from Studio into the definer. For those that use Teamwork a lot, you'll notice that some of the screens in Teamwork have undergone a change as well. That's to bring them closer to the functionality that was available in Studio already and align the Teamwork capability with Studio. We imported the sentences we exported in the first video, and in your formulations you saw that the color coding is applied there as well, as opposed to in the previous version where the sentences would still appear as normal black text. You saw that the user clicked on the term local branches, and when they clicked, the browser control in the client-server application opened, and it showed the Studio instance with the search for the local branch there. A little bit more about the browser control we'll see later on during the webinar. We're going to be looking at the third video where we're going to be capturing implementation details of the formulations that we have imported.
Implementations for business rules have been updated to make it easier to log how a business rule is implemented. Types are now predefined, and names can be found using a quick lookup option.
Again, a quite short video showing you how you can link your implementations to the formulations that are available in Teamwork. Again, for those already familiar with Teamwork, you'll see that the way these implementations are now captured has changed. There's a lot of base information already pre-available for you, such as implementation types. And you don't have to capture them yourself anymore. We've made quite a list available for you to use. The fourth and last video about SBVR and the App Factory speaks to the implementation details and where you can find them for particular items in your application. We'll be looking at the local branch table, and at that table you'll see two new tabs being included. One looking at which formulations are implemented by that particular table, and the other one looking at the actual formulations linked to that table.
Each implementation in USoft now has two additional tabs, linking back to the business rule. Looking at the local branch table, we first get to see which rules it implements, and afterwards a clickable link to the formulations in the Formulations tab.
Again, quite a short video showing you how implementation details are now available at all of the different implementation types that exist within the definer. We've now seen an example for a table, but similar approaches are also available for constraints and the other different types of implementations that we have. Again, when we clicked on the highlighted green term local branch, the browser control opens showing you the local branch search within Studio. So that's available throughout the application and not just from within Teamwork. A second part of the enhanced integration between Studio and the App Factory speaks to ER diagrams and the template domains. What we're going to be showing you in these two videos is firstly where you can find existing ER diagrams that are generated by the definer for you. There's two different options, one from within a business object, the other one from a catalog. Both will be shown. And then at the end of the video, we'll see a diagram being presented to us.
The implementation of ER diagrams in the definer can be found in two different ways. One, by opening the business object under the business area option in the catalog. Under the business object, we take a look at the three tables that are currently part of it. The ER diagram can be opened by a button on the business object window or from the right mouse menu that appears by right-clicking on the catalog. After clicking on the Open button, the browser control is opened, showing the ER diagram that is generated based on the information available in the repository.
That was the first video about opening and exploring ER diagrams in the definer. You saw that they can be opened from both within a business object as well as from the catalog itself. And when we opened the diagram, we saw that it was linked to that particular business object showing the three tables that currently form part of it. That diagram was generated by the definers. It wasn't drawn by me or by anybody else. It was automatically generated for us with all the information that's available in the definer. In this second video, we're going to be showing something that I'm particularly excited about, and that's the ability to create tables from within the ER diagram. So two tables will be created. You'll see them being drawn from scratch in that particular ER diagram. That still includes the three tables that we already shown. Columns will be added in these tables, and relations will be made between the different tables. And at the end of the video, you'll see that those are then saved and synchronized. And when we then have a look in the definer, you'll see that those are actually created for you and don't require any action from you in the definer anymore for their creation.
The layout and formatting of the ER diagram can be changed by the user. Furthermore, new tables can be created directly relating to existing tables. After creating a new table, the columns in the table can be added, renamed, and given the necessary properties. Tables can also be created separately and linked to existing tables after they have been drawn. After saving the diagram, the tables and relations are created in the repository. The columns of newly created tables use the template domains selected when the ER diagram was drawn.
That was the second video about the ER diagrams, in which we saw the options to make the diagram or change the look and feel of the diagram, as well as the option to add additional tables, columns, and relations in a ER diagram. And once those were saved and synchronized, you saw them being created as base models in your definer as well, without any further manual action being required. So going forward, you can still create and change your tables from within the definer, but you can also change them using these ER diagrams that are also available in the definer. We're now going to have a look at the other additions and enhancements that have been made to the platform in USoft 11. The first two speak to our web components. We've got an entirely renewed runtime web UI, as well as a revised UDB API, which is the underlying scripting that is needed to make the web pages function properly. We've extended the authorization capabilities available to you in our platform. From USoft 11, you can now start using single sign-on in the client server, so you don't necessarily need separate user credentials for your client server applications or in your definer anymore. You can use single sign-on there. We've further simplified the user model in the USoft authorizer, and we've extended the authorization capabilities. Two examples of those: you can now limit the writes on components, as you could in the past for your tables already. Those capabilities have now been extended to components as well as limit the writes that users have on the DDL actions they can perform in a database. Last but certainly not least, we've implemented a browser control in the client server UI. We've already seen a couple of examples of that. The first one was the studio interaction that we saw from within the definer. When we clicked on a green term, local branch in our example, the browser control was open, showing you the studio interface with a particular search, in that case for local branch, as well as the ER diagrams that we just saw an example of. Those are two examples of the browser control in the UI. The browser control basically enables full HTML5 capabilities in your USoft client server application. I've got another example of that for you, lined up for you. The example shows you some of the capabilities. They do get quite technical. We'll see a SVG image with some of its properties that will now appear in the application. And we'll also see changes being made to the properties, i.e. the speed of a dot that's moving through the screen, as well as the color of that dot, all based on information captured in your USoft application.
We have seen examples of the browser control in the SBVR and ER diagram videos. In this video, we'll look at the browser control in more detail. In the Windows Designer, we have a window with the browser control open, and we're taking a look at the data property of the browser box. We're looking at an example based on an SVG, which will appear as an ellipse. When we click on the ellipse, a message dialog will appear, as defined in the data property. Looking further at the functions linked to the SVG, we get to see where the input that is used by the SVG is defined, a table in our repository. When we run the window, we will see the SVG reacting to changes in the data, either by browsing through different records or after changes have been committed. When we click on the SVG, the message that we saw defined earlier is shown.
There was a clip about the browser control, another example of the browser control in the client-server application. We saw some of the technical implementation details as well as the interaction with data under your application. You saw the little dot changing color as well as changing speed with which it moved through the Eclipse, as well as interaction from a mouse click. We clicked on that on the SVG and we got a message back. If you take that a little further, you could think of other examples. For instance, having an image of hotel rooms, and if you click on a particular room, you get details from that particular room, or assign things to that particular room. Before we move over to the Q&A section, just a quick look at what's planned for the USoft 11 series. So not necessarily for the USoft 11 release itself, but for 11.1 and other releases that might follow it. We're looking at running our client-server apps browser-based from the cloud, which is an ongoing research process that's currently already has delivered a functioning prototype, and its capability we want to extend further. We're looking into capabilities of integrating artificial intelligence into our platform as well, whereby we'll be enabling our users to use smart prompting to a ChatGPT-like model that can then assist the user, giving them prompts based on studio formulations as well as the data of your data model and the relationships and the rules that you've implemented in your application. And another one of the other items we're looking at is the ability to draw and use decision tables in your definer. That capability will probably look and feel a similar way as we've just shown you for these ER diagrams. I'm now going to be handing over to my colleague Frank here next to me, because I've seen there's some questions that have come in the chat, and he'll try to answer them as best he can.
All right, we have a number of questions, and a number of them are about version control. A question, can we go back to any version in history? And yeah, together with the question, if one user synchronizes but decides the sync is not needed, can he go back to the version before he merged with a certain user or a certain repository? Actually, the answer to all these questions is that whatever Git or the version control system that you use allows you to do will be synchronized in the use of the repository that you locally have to develop. So say you're working on a certain version, you can choose to go to, with the Git version control, to go to an older version, and then you can synchronize your repository to that version. So all the freedom that a version control system like Git gives you can be used, and the use of the repository will simply synchronize to whatever it sees in the version control system. So hopefully that answers these questions, and otherwise come back to us and we'll try to give a better answer.
Yes, I'm sorry, Frank, just to add there, obviously in our example we use Git, but is Git the only supported system? Or?
No, you can use any version control system that you like. USoft simply saves all its repository content to a well-structured XML that's easy to compare. It has a specific layout to make comparison easier. And any version control system can handle those files, can clone, push, pull them from a version control system.
Thank you.
Yes. Then I have another question. Let's check, where is it gone? Oh yeah, can the ER diagrams easily be exported? Yes, they can. The data is stored in an object management group formal standard. You will see it in the field where the ER diagram is stored, but there's also an export button in the diagram that will export this to file for you, or the other way around, you can import an ER diagram in this standard into USoft if you like. Let's see if there are any other questions.
Yes.
Will there be a new feature of using placeholders. Well, that's a good question. I don't have the answer right now, so that's one that we have to answer later. I know they've been working in that area, but I don't know at the moment what would be the correct answer. And the other question is, when is the GA date? That is the release date, or
I think so.
or
General availability.
general availability?
I'm assuming.
Yes.
So as mentioned, Beta 1 is available by the end of this week. Beta 2 is planned for Q2. And the first full production release is currently planned for the beginning of Q1, so sometime October.
All right. Well, I see another question about ER diagrams. When upgrading from version 10 or manually adding a table, will it update also the ER diagrams? Yeah, the answer is yes, because if you migrate from 10 to 11, all the data is simply stored in T-table, T-column, the famous definer tables that hold such data, including relations and other tables. And the ER diagram is derived from the data the first time. So it's produced in a usable layout from that point on. So that will work in 11 then. You open the diagram and you will see the diagram according to whatever data there is in the meta system T-table, T-column. Then you can change the layout. You can add fields, you can add tables, and all that position information will be stored and kept for future usage. So that hopefully answers that question. I think I have had all the questions. Hopefully, yeah, that's all the questions that I currently see on the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Should you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll answer them as and when we receive those. That brings us to the end of our What's New in USoft 11 webinar for today. Thank you very much for your attention and joining us. As I mentioned in the beginning, the recording of this webinar will be sent to you via email probably tomorrow. And we'll look into making the videos available separately, probably on the community platform with a voiceover as well. So you can have a relook at those and see all of the exciting capabilities that we showed you in those videos. So thank you and have a good day.